Listen, I've never had any problem expressing my opinions, but what we're doing here is bigger than that. These are conversations that need to be had in an unfiltered way. Drag racing's all I've ever done. It's all I care to do. I respect the history, I appreciate how far we've come, but I want more for this sport, and I'll fight for it. It's uncut, it's unfiltered. This is the show of shows. The biggest names in drag racing. No holds barred. This is the great American motorsport. Drag racing. Prove me wrong. I'll wait. Hey gang, Wes Buck here, Drag Illustrated Magazine checking in. It is Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. Hope you are doing well. Hope you enjoyed a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Fighting through some wild weather, it seems like, across the board. We've been getting it, pretty serious down here in Texas, man. We've had back-to-back days of crazy rainstorms and tornadoes and insanity. But I hope you guys are all staying safe out there and had a fun weekend. Tons going on in the sport of drag racing. Somehow, some way, the summer is upon us. Kids are out of school. It's time to go drag racing. Hard to really wrap your head around all the things that are going on. We've got NPK to talk about. NPK rolls into the brand new Flying H drag strip outside of Kansas City, Missouri. So we got to cover that, of course. We have the PDRA taking over Norwalk, the house that Bill Bader built. Very exciting weekend for the PDRA. Great to see. I was just thinking about how cool it is that we still have guys like Jim Halsey, Todd Tutterow, after all these years. I mean, it feels like to see them still so relevant. It's still so prominent in our sport. It really just excites me about the future of pro modified drag racing specifically. We've got the NHRA staring down the barrel of a return to Epping Dragway or New England Dragway in Epping, New Hampshire. Always an exciting time. We got potentially record-setting conditions this weekend, so we've got to obviously talk about that and a ton of other things going on. But before I get any further along, hey guys, what's going on? Mike, JT in the house. JT, we're about back, big dog.
I'm coming back.
1 week.
You look good.
It's impressive,
1
man.
week.
Yep.
I got to say, I'm pretty impressed, bro.
It is. Because it's taken me about 20 years just to get this going.
I know it did, Mike. Gosh.
I spent 4 months
You're still my buddy, though. But man,
I spent 4 months on the ocean getting this. I
use Miracle Grow, a mixture of Miracle Grow and just throw whatever on it. It gets it growing pretty good. I'm like a chia pet.
I'm surprised you don't use Roundup. That's probably how you shaved last week. Roundup.
It was Roundup, yeah. Oh I roomed with Lyle last year somewhere, and
did it just rub off on you? Now you can grow a beard overnight.
I could have collected the hair in the bathroom and just glued it on, and probably had a comparative bearded Lyle. I think.
Yeah. I'm not at all
rooming with Sasquatch. That's what I called it.
Wow.
What a deal. What's going on, guys? How you doing? Everybody, what's
Dude,
man,
the
Mike?
Cicadas here are crazy.
The brand new issue of Drag Illustrated Magazine hitting mailboxes as we speak. I got my copies, I think, late last week. And holy moly, man, this thing, I got to give it to you, dude. First and foremost, I just love the matte cover. Are you guys all still as in love with the matte finish on the cover as I am?
Velvet.
I just think it's so refined.
Velvet. You got to call it by the
Velvet.
actual name.
Velvet.
It's Velvet.
It just feels so good, bro. Like I'm trying to rub it in front of the. Here we go.
Yeah,
it
don't rub
feels
it
so
too much,
nice.
man.
Yeah, I won't want to. I don't want to get Derek excited or anything, but it's man, it's fantastic. I mean, seriously, an incredible issue of the magazine. I love how wide of a swath we paint here. Like here I'm reading about the new Rad Torqueway or the new ownership of Rad Torqueway, and you got Top Alcohol Dragster stuff, Sportsman stuff, Elin Warner in here with the Bracket Bonanza, PDRA coverage, obviously extensive coverage from the World Series of Pro Mod. This stuff looks fantastic, dude. Absolutely amazing. It's nice
like a 5-page feature with Wes Buck. His second.
Yeah, I wasn't pissed about that.
Second, a feature in a magazine. So
I haven't sat down and actually.
You're making it, man.
Went through it yet.
I'm really proud of it, man.
It
looks good. I got
boxes,
kids in there, my wife. It's awesome.
Our bulk boxes came in yesterday.
These pictures from the party look fantastic too, right?
Yep.
I just thought the whole deal. Lance dragging the bumper and the chute simultaneously. What a weekend, man. What a freaking weekend. I really can't wait to do it again. I think I'm still in a little bit of my post-World Series slump where I just like, I want to be talking about that. I want to be working on that. I want to be talking, you know what I mean? And we obviously are. You're always working towards some sort of, some part or some facet of what we're doing. But yeah, it's just such an exciting time. And I think I mean, obviously we're biased, right? No doubt we're biased. But I'm proud of it. And I'm proud of the way everybody comes together and then the excitement that it generates and the way it seems to last for quite a while. I don't know. I'm just excited for what's next.
And like we talk about, it leads into success for the rest of the season. It seems to never fail. I mean, Spencer Hyde seems like he's just been on a streak since World Series 2023.
Yeah.
I think he's currently leading the PDRA Pro Boost points, or he was going into Norwalk. And Halsey won.
I saw a video of him earlier treating someone so bad it looked like it was almost a bracket race.
Yeah, and then you got Halsey in the winner's circle again. Derek Ward's been running well all season.
Yep.
It just, guys that come out ready for that race, I think, continue it on for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Halsey leading the Pro Nitrous points, Derek Ward and Spencer Hyde 2 and 3 in the points behind Todd Tutterow, who also made it to the semifinals of the World Series of Pro Mod. So there's no doubt. I mean, I guess we may as well start here. I was very excited for the the PDRA to make their return to Norwalk. Like, that's a part of the country that just seems very door slammer centric. I remember when we started the magazine, I was blown away by how many of our subscribers are in Ohio. I mean, I think it's just that IHRA foothold that existed there. There's a lot of big cities in Ohio. There's a lot of drag strips in Ohio and a lot of drag racers in Ohio. And it's always cool to see a door slammer centric series like the PDRA roll into a facility, a part of the country like that. Fantastic weekend for Jim Halsey. We saw some great racing, saw a couple close calls. Derek Ward went on a wild ride, got some fluid under the tire up on 2 wheels. It was pretty scary. I was holding my breath there for a minute, but my boy came through and really just a fantastic.
Another one of those situations where it just so happened the car in the other lane aborted the run. Can you imagine that situation if it was just neck and neck, side by side? I mean, that seems to happen 99 times out of 100 when a car crosses the lane. Somehow the other car is either way ahead or usually an aborted run. So thank goodness for that. What do you think about there's a ton of racing going on this weekend. And we talked about this a little bit last week with Elon and Rex talking about the betting deal and how Memorial Day weekend is pretty much known as, the greatest racing weekend or the greatest racing day. The Sunday of Memorial Day weekend is the greatest racing day in the world, so to speak. But drag racing isn't a part of that. And what do you think? We've talked about this a little bit in the past, and there is a lot of racing going on that weekend, and maybe it would get overshadowed, but like the betting thing, talking about building a parlay of IndyCar, F1, NASCAR, and drag racing, and kind of being guilty by association or being involved with these huge racing organizations. I mean, what do you think about NHRA putting a date on Memorial Day? Traditionally, I can't tell you the last time they did. I'm not a historian in that regard. I just know that obviously we have Labor Day, and NHRA really leans into the Labor Day deal at Indy. But with Memorial Day, they're usually off, and then you've got PDRA and you've got a lot of other racing going on. But what's your take on that? And like kind of throwing your hat in and diving into the greatest weekend of racing.
Personally, I think we're at a point in the sport, and I think this is honestly probably something that there's a lot of conversation to be had around this topic, is just finding ways to gain market share. And I do think that guilty by association component is pretty powerful here. Like, if there was an opportunity for NHRA or drag racing in some way, shape, or form, just to, like you said, be mentioned in the same breath as those other events, I think it would be massively impactful. And if I'm NHRA and I'm kind of, weighing scheduling options for 2025 and thinking about different venues, and, I know there's still some things up in the air. What happens to a couple of these dates? And I do think, don't you agree, Mike? Like, is the door not open for something like that? I mean, the stage seems set. Like, I don't know that it would have made sense prior to this vet or this betting situation. But I mean, it's been, I can't remember that. We're actually getting some.
Yeah, we're getting some info here.
Cajun Nationals in Baton Rouge, a number of years in Topeka, Kansas.
So they have competed on
way.
Memorial Day, but not since. I mean, maybe this is a recent thing, or I'm just now coming to the age where you're recognizing this, that we're not a part of the greatest day of racing. And they raced the weekend prior in Chicago, then they raced this weekend in Epping. So it's like, shuffle that around a little bit, and maybe you could put one of those dates on Memorial Day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've got to, for me, I think, I believe that in the past they've probably wanted to avoid competing.
Yeah.
Right. Like
Parks has a great point in here. You could do it like a Saturday night shootout type deal and try to dominate that Saturday. The Sunday is booked. I mean, you go straight from F1 to IndyCar to the 600, and it's a full day. So I agree with him in that regard, but I think you could get involved in the weekend somehow.
Well, I mean, I think it's similar to how the UFC almost always has a big fight the Saturday night before the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? And I think that there may be a play there where I think that Jim may be onto something. I do think that the opportunity is to think way outside of the box. I mean, that is the thing that we've got to, and I'm glad to see more of that happening. I mean, the NHRA doing the 2-day race at Virginia this summer, I think, is a great example of trying some new ideas. But I think a show that ends on Saturday night under the lights at a legit a venue that makes sense, like a venue that's got some store. I mean, this Bristol weekend, I mean, you can't ask for much better of a facility. Iconic location, iconic part of the country, significant in its drag racing heritage, holds a big crowd, visually different, looks different than a lot of the other tracks on the tour. I mean, the play may be right there with Bristol. I mean, I don't know what else they have going on that weekend, but
I don't think the betting would really matter. I mean, I get that you could do a parlay, but I don't know that it's something that would add anything,
not right off the start, but it starts to make you think about it, though, the fact that we're just idle on that weekend.
Yeah.
And someone saying that to run on Monday of Memorial Day. But I think that Memorial Day is viewed as like a solemn holiday, and that's why we like celebrate all leading up to it. And then Monday is actually supposed to be you're not supposed to be partying and having a ton of fun. You're supposed to be a day of remembrance. Except unless you're JT, or unless there's rain or whatever else. But
JT, whoops.
Yeah, I'm told him, we need to start doing this. I did tell him we need to start doing it on Sunday, because everybody's partying on Monday, and they're like, and everybody's, oh man, got to go back to work tomorrow, so they're wanting to cut it off early. And
it's like a built-in day of recovery for you, and you're still not taking advantage of it.
No.
Yeah, JT, and now it's a built-in extra party day on the calendar. Yes. No, I mean, I do think you're right. It's supposed to be a solemn holiday, day of reflection and whatnot, and I certainly obviously respect that, and I don't know to the open space, the open real estate, and I do think you've got a market that's, a lot of people are home, or they're doing stuff with their family, or they've traveled somewhere, and it's a reason to get people together. A reason
that
to congregate
around would be great, because I mean, think about it. When people go to the lake or they've been outside all day long, a lot of times people are inside, by then, and looking for something to watch. And I think Saturday night would be awesome.
It also seems like they battle a ton of weather on Memorial Day weekend. It's like every year. I mean, in Indy this year, it was delayed. Huge thunderstorm came through. The 600 battled rain, and they had to eventually call it after sitting there for hours and hours trying to dry the track. So Monday is that built-in buffer, but it's certain something to look at. And like you said, I feel like NHRA right now is more open to these schedule changes, and they're kind of quietly making a couple little tweaks here and there every year. So maybe it's something we'll see.
It does seem like there could be. I mean, why not? I mean, I just feel like we're at a point and this is something that permeates the entire community. It's like, why not try something? Because that's what I continue to come back to, is that, and it's in the opening of the show, and I don't want to get all fired up this early, but it does drive me crazy. It drives me crazy. It really does. I mean, it's like we've been doing this for 70 years, and you've got like guys like John Force struggling to secure the necessary sponsorship to field all of his cars. You've got some of the biggest stars in our space that aren't able to make this make sense. And we have to start trying different things. We cannot continue to just beat our heads against the wall and hope for the next billionaire thrill seeker to come along and field a team or start a sanction. Like those things are fantastic. And if you look back through the history of our sport, we've been very dependent on those types of people that come in with a very successful business. They get a taste of drag racing, they fall in love. But you look at it and there's a cycle here. Like there's a very predictable trend where we see these new companies come in, they go crazy, they're sponsoring everything, they've got 57 teams, and then a few years later they're gone. They've moved on to the next thing because we struggle to like harness those people in a meaningful way. I think they come into our sport, and I don't think it would take a rocket scientist to like create a list just off like the conversation we're having here. I think you could all close your eyes. I challenge you to do it. Close your eyes and start thinking about the logos that you're starting to see everywhere. And as exciting as that can be, and as meaningful and impactful as it can be for a pocket of people or for the sport as a whole, I'm not diminishing or devaluing those companies, those people, those stakeholders' contribution respectively. Not at all. But we have to find a way to match that kind of goodwill and excitement and momentum and energy and give them something back for it and create sustainable, lasting growth. Like it has to be something that we can maintain over time. And I still come back to this thing. It's like, how in the world have we been doing this in an organized fashion for 7+ decades? And we have people struggling to make this make sense. Like I'm so proud of how many people race and we were just talking about PDRA, but it's not just them. You've got drag strips all across the country and drag racing organizations, sanctioned series, events, small, big, and everything in between doing really well. We actually saw the performance racing industry market report earlier this morning, and we're going through it. And, by all accounts, we're seeing more people racing. Like almost every company that was, a large percentage of the companies look at the racetracks and look at the grandstands and see things headed in the right direction. But I think that we need to like not squander this moment in time. Does that make sense to you, Mike? Like,
yeah. I was gonna tie that in with that report.
I'm just glad you didn't get worked up this early.
yeah,
I didn't get that worked up.
Yeah, we saw the redness level reach a certain, and JT brought it back in. So the report though, it echoes exactly what you're saying. And I was surprised, or not surprised, but it was nice to see drag racing dominate this report, to be honest with you. And a lot of the numbers I think come from just the sheer volume of drag racing, the number of competitors there are, the number of cars out there, and how drag racing is kind of based around do-it-yourselfers buying parts and upgrading their car. But if you read this report, drag racing absolutely dominates in manufacturer support, number of companies that make parts for drag racing.
Over half, media. I think right about half the companies that exist in the automotive aftermarket participate in drag racing.
Yes.
That's you're talking about a $50 billion or whatever industry, and half of them are involved in the sport. And like that tells me, if our industry is that big, if you look at the report, Mike, pull that page up, and I don't know if we can share it, but there is a page here that identifies the size of the market. And I'm trying to find it. 2 seconds here. I apologize. I should have been more prepared for this.
Yeah, we have this like the summary in front of us, but
$8.4 billion is the sales of track use only parts for motorsports. $8.4 billion, Mike, JT. Are you like to be that big? Where's the disconnect? Do you know what I'm saying? Like we have to make some of these things work together. One thing that I think the challenge needs to go out, that companies in this space need to be reinvesting in the sport. Like we're seeing all these roll-ups and all these acquisitions and all these things happening, but like, is money being invested adequately back into our sport? Like I wonder if there's some bean counter types that are getting their hooks in some of these things and not recognizing that this is a big industry, and to keep these guys going, you got to give back. You got to play the game. I run into it all the time.
We see a lot of the same companies supporting multiple different events and sanctions, right? But a lot of times it's the same companies. What about these other companies? Yeah, they're selling the same amount of stuff. Maybe not exactly, but they're
I think
selling
the challenge goes out. you know, and I'm not trying to call anybody out, but here's what I would tell folks that we need to do as an industry is we need to support those who support us. I mean, it's a great opportunity for me to remind you that, you know, this podcast is made possible by way of Redline Synthetic Oils. I encourage you to support the companies that support content and projects like this. Stroud Safety, another one, support the companies. And these, they don't just support us. They support the PDRA. They support the Midwest Drag Racing Series. They support NMCA. They support NHRA. They support teams across the board, small, large. They're racers themselves. They're enthusiasts.
Eminem and Strange. There's another two that you see a lot, and in a wide swath that they're painting, you know, like we talked about earlier.
Look at the relationship they have with racers, and look at the legacy they've built. I mean, that's the thing that I typically see is like whenever these people come into these mergers and acquisitions happen, right? It's like the first thing they do is get rid of all the boots on the ground. Like all the guys that you used to see wearing that company's logo at every NHRA race or at every PDRA or NMCA race, the guys that make the tour and spend their weekends out supporting their customer base, like those guys get cut almost immediately because they're seen as some hard to quantify expense. And it's like, man, we're spending all this money sending this racer around the country or this guy around the country, but they don't realize how critical that person's relationship and his network and his willingness to help and be there, even if you don't do anything meaningful. Like I look at some of these guys, Farron from Hoosier Tire. I think about Tommy Kundrick and his role that he had forever with Mickey Thompson tires. I think about Roger Conley that was forever linked to Race Pack. Like those guys, I can't really understate or overstate their value to those companies. I mean, they were like a complete direct connection to them. And a lot of times that seems to get sacrificed in the name of profit. You know, like we need these companies reinvesting in our sport, putting more money back into the sport, because clearly the numbers are there. Like,
yeah, drag racing is it accounts for such a huge portion of these sales. 75% of sales from manufacturers, 67% from resellers. And then the next closest one is street and strip, which is in like the 60s as far as percentage. So, and I mean, you might as well just call that drag racing also. Vintage car, road course, oval, those are the next few to round out the top 5. But drag racing dominates each of these statistics as far as manufacturer support. And then this is a huge report that PRI put out, by the way. Kudos to those guys. I think SEMA has done something like this on like the entire automotive aftermarket for probably decades now. But as far as the hardcore racing market, I think this is PRI's first attempt to sort of encapsulate all the data that's swirling around that market and put this into a huge report, which is available to PRI members. Again, another huge addition to that program that PRI launched a couple of years ago. So this gives us, I mean, there's so much data in here, Wes, like to do when we're putting together our decks, when we're trying to explain to advertisers or sponsors what the potential ROI of their investment with us or in drag racing. These kind of numbers are invaluable. And a lot of times I feel like we're sort of reaching, or someone may think you're blowing smoke when you come up with these numbers. But when you have the industry advocacy group, or whatever you want to call PRI in this case, producing these numbers that are, not BS or not biased in any way, it's a strong tool that we can use, race teams can use, manufacturers can use, anyone really involved in the industry, tracks, associations, sanctioning bodies. This is a huge deal, and I'm really happy to see them put the resources together and produce this, because we could be leaning on this until, I mean, maybe they'll do this every year, but we'll be leaning on this until then.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like when you guys were walking around PRI, I mean, I know that maybe because we're in the drag racing space, but there is so much drag racing stuff there that you almost forget that the other performance racing industry is even there besides drag racing. Yeah. I mean, is it just me?
You're right. That's actually a good point, JT. If you do walk around PRI, it does. I'm like, nah, it's just because I'm in drag racing, right? But if you really
stop and think about it, I mean, it is dominated with drag racing.
And these numbers bear that out. Drag racing, this is a page that says overview of racing types that these companies are involved with or support. Drag racing is 47%. The next closest one, again, like I said, road course, 28%. So
that's a huge swing, 19% difference. I mean, that to me, that is a really, and I guess part of me is, it feels like the desire is there. And you know what? It's kind of like being a conservative almost. Like we're too quiet, right? Like we're too busy doing other things to like march on Washington. Like, right, we're running our businesses, we're leading our families, we're doing all these things that we have to do. But like this, we have to get a little bit more vocal about these things. And I think we have to, as a community, challenge the companies, like making sure that when you're buying parts, make sure you're buying parts from the companies that you see flying flags at racetracks. Make sure you buy from the companies like the car dealership that's sponsoring a scoreboard at Tulsa. Make sure that you're supporting the brands that are supporting our sport, because there's a lot of people there's a lot of money being generated in this space. And I'm not totally convinced that it's all being adequately invested back into our sport. I want everybody to make a bunch of money. I hope everybody's rich. I want everybody to be a millionaire. I really, truly do. But we do need to see these companies piling back into our sport. I mean, and letting this group of people know that they appreciate them, they care about them. And I think it really does. It's on us to cast our vote with our wallets and support the companies that support the sport of drag racing. And I think we're going to see that become more and more prominent.
Let's talk about where we need that support, and let's talk about the flip side of this coin. The numbers in this report also show it kind of takes the temperature of what these race teams, resellers, manufacturers are positive about or optimistic about, and what they're not optimistic about. And the most pessimistic outlook throughout the whole report is on youth involvement in racing and the future of young people in the sport. Pretty much across the board, the worst numbers are when it comes to that segment, as far as getting influencing and bringing in new blood to the sport and retaining interest with young people. So we talk about that a lot, and we've done a few things to try to recognize that within our space with 30 under 30, and kind of continue to try to beat that drum. But it seems to be a
harder and harder though.
Yeah,
as time goes on. You guys have kids. You see, I mean, they can sit down and play these racing simulators and everything on their gaming computers. They're online with their friends at home. They don't need to go over and have sleepovers anymore. I mean, like they almost don't want to hang out with their friends, around friends, because they can't be on the same game at the same time, right? But that bleeds into going to the track or going outside and working on a motor, or I mean, we did a lot of that stuff because we were bored. We didn't have anything else to do. We started tinkering with motors. We started doing things outside and going to races and just doing kid stuff, outside, because we didn't have all this other new stuff coming along. And
well, I think
they got so much of it now. Like, I don't know how we're going to get, and I'm talking kids that are young right now. Like,
right.
It's going to get worse.
I can't argue, but I think that we're like, you can't cry over spilled milk either, right? Like, you're 1,000,000% right. Times have changed. Things are different, but we can't just go, oh, damn it, kids have changed. We have to go, how can we find a way to connect to these people, not just give up, right? And I do feel like it's kind of one of these things where it's like, well, they're not going to do it the way that we want them to do it, or the way that we did it, so screw it. And I don't think that can be the answer. I mean, I'm looking at, there are other ways. I mean, to your point, like, my kids are gamers for sure. I was a gamer growing up, but like, I see these things can happen differently. Like my son, right, Max, he just turned 16, and I'll admit that he has kind of like he doesn't have near the relationship with the automobile that I do, right? Like, everything, cars to me are like a love language. It's hard. Like, I mean, from daily drivers to hot rods, everything in between. Like, I've never not had a like significant relationship with my vehicle, right? I mean, it's just part of who I am. My son, a lot different. However, through video gaming, through the Formula One simulators, through the No Limit Drag Racing 2.0 game on smartphones, through these things,
his interest, right?
It sparked his interest, and now I've got him going, hey man, I want to go to track days. I want to go, I want to start doing this. Like, maybe we should buy a go-kart, whatever. I'm having these conversations. So it's like, there's a way to make the gaming space work for us. There's a way to put that to use.
Even the YouTube space. I mean, like, what we would say that the No Prep Kings following is probably a younger demographic than most drag racing sanctions, right? And from what I'm hearing everywhere, people love this YouTube live, basically kind of raw looking footage, right?
Yeah, I mean,
you've heard that too, I'm sure.
Well, the other part of
And
it, so
that's a
there's
younger
two parts.
demographic, so
It is. I mean, there's a couple of parts to it. First and foremost, we have to embrace technology. Like, it
Yeah.
has its pros and cons. There's no doubt about it. But like, if you think about how kind of late to the party, drag racing has been on so many of these technological fronts. I mean, look no further than the betting thing. I mean, that's not necessarily I mean, it is a largely technology driven situation, right? And we've been way behind the curve on that. We've been way behind the curve on video games. We've been way behind the curve on shoulder programming and additional storytelling based content. We're late to the party on all those things. And to me, that seems like everything we just outlined are all the things we need to be leaning into. Because another thing that was identified in that report, Mike, was the viewership of Formula One's Drive to Survive on Netflix. And there were 90 million hours that viewers watched of season 5 of Formula One Drive to Survive. 90 million minutes viewed. I mean, that to me is going, I mean, if the fact that the viewership for a freaking Netflix show is even being used as a metric to describe the health and wellness of motorsports is pretty interesting. But to me,
but it brought both of us, or maybe all three of us, kind of into it.
It brought all three of us to Formula One.
Yeah, I was gonna say I didn't give a shit before I watched that show.
I know a lot of people. One of my wife's friends is big into F1 now.
Lisa's got friends.
Yeah, she does a couple.
Solely
because of that show. And so, yeah, it definitely is a huge driver. The other thing that I noticed about this report is basically they compare like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and you can basically, in as far as like overall numbers or sentiment, and it peaked in about 2018 or 2019 and then dropped way down. But if you look at 2023, the numbers 2022 and 2023 compare pretty closely to 2018 and 2019. So as a whole, you can kind of say from these numbers that we are back to pre-pandemic levels of spending, of purchasing, business from all standpoints of the industry. So I kind of think we're at a point where we can put the pandemic behind us and just keep moving forward, and now try to continue to grow from that 2018, 2019 level without having to say, well, the pandemic this, pandemic that, as far as what it did to hold us back.
It's thank God. It's nice to kind of feel like we're putting that chapter of our lives behind us. I don't know.
I enjoyed that pandemic year.
yeah.
I played more golf that year than
if you bought real estate or a couple other things during the pandemic, you were doing it right. Stocks. That would have been a great one. Basically, buy anything, and we knew that, right? We heard.
No,
about
we
this
didn't
and talked about that.
Like
we didn't know.
I thought I was gonna screw over someone on a Raptor. Remember, Wes? I was like, I'm gonna buy all kinds of stuff when people are needing money. Hell, everything went up double. Like everybody's buying everything. I'm like,
it went up after.
Money? I thought everybody's laid off.
But these numbers are fascinating, and I encourage anybody that isn't a PRI, that is a PRA member, to jump in there and grab this. And if you're not a PRI member, join, because what is it? I don't even know what the cost is per year, but there's 45. Tons of benefits in there, all kinds of discounts. I think I was in there when I was downloading this. You get like 15% off VP fuel. There's like 10% off at Summit, or all these. You don't have to be in the industry or hardcore into one niche or the other. There's some very broad companies that serve a lot of forms of motorsports that offer discounts to PRI members. So check that out, because they continue to add value to that membership, which I think is a really cool deal. And this is just the latest.
This
part
type
of
of information is really valuable, and I'm glad we should perhaps publish some sort of summary of it for people that, and we'll actually work on that this week, publishing.
There's one more part of it too: media coverage. This is how it pertains to us, as far as the sentiment of that. It has the smallest percentage of people that think that it's staying the same. It has the biggest swing as far as people think that it's declining or increasing. It's like in the 40s in either direction, and then it's like in the 20s as far as people that think that it's staying the same. So that it's kind of polarizing views on media coverage of the racing industry. So it's either heavily swinging in the decline or it's increasing.
I think it's probably people that have a loose definition, right? Because I think it's just the definition of media is so different today than it was 5 years ago.
it's perception also. I think it's what those people on the decline maybe are, getting their information from some kind of outlet that's gone out of business or is on the decline, or maybe aren't riding the wave of podcasts or YouTube or social media or whatever. So I really think that's perception driven, because media, in my view, I mean, the Netflix thing is a great example. There's more racing than ever, it feels like, and I feel like there's more racing media than ever, to be honest with you. Some of the big stalwarts have gone by the wayside, but as far as overall like independent media coverage, I feel like that's on the rise.
I tend to agree. I mean, if you look at YouTube, look no further than YouTube in the amount of content creators that are on there creating, telling stories around the sport of drag racing or chronicling their own adventures. I mean, there is more stuff being, and again, all of these things to me point back to where's the disconnect? Like we see these channels exploding on YouTube. We got people in our space that have millions of followers in the automotive space, but it seems like we're not able to like bring the whole thing together. Right? Like we're not, and I think it's weird because we talk about all these like I said, big number here, big number there, right? It's a huge audience. It's TV viewership is up. It's the size of the industry as a whole is up. Everything
we're so chopped up on everything. Like, we've got so many different things going on in our space.
And maybe that's what we're going to have to do. Like, I don't mean to like, this is me. I'm going to probably go on like maybe we're going to have to like just form our own like union. Almost like I don't know, like, because I think about like we may have to do this, we may have to take this on ourselves, because it does seem like our sport is so segmented. We have all these things that exist and are relatively successful, like in their silo or in their lane, but the magic is going to happen when we move as one. You know what I mean? Like the magic is going to happen when we all recognize that no matter where. I actually saw a clip from a podcast earlier this week, and it was a young woman talking about how she just doesn't connect to pro level drag racing because she's a sportsman drag racer. So really the only thing that she can really truly get into or be or kind of like share some perspective or whatever is with other sportsman drag racers. For me, I'm going, I think that mindset may well be part of the problem. It is that we're all so ingrained in like what it is we're doing that we're kind of failing to realize that what our sport needs right now is we have to maintain that, but we've got to show some, like, we got to spread it out. We've got to like start to put our head and take the blinders off and recognize how big this industry is, how big and powerful and influential this community of people is. And if we could all get swimming in the same direction, like that's when we can really create meaningful change. But it's, right now, there's just so many things going in so many different directions. There's a lack of cohesion. It's a really, it's a difficult one, and I go back to, the youth thing, Mike. I wanted to talk about this momentarily, is that one of the things that I see is like, we see, we need to lean into social media and we need to lean into technology and we need to, whatever, do all these youth initiatives, like what we can do to get more people out to the sport. But a lot of it is just connecting humans with other humans. I think there's so much of a focus. I don't know if people know this, but there is a really cool tool you can use. It's the Meta ad library, right? So if you just type into Google Meta, META, ad library, you can search Facebook for any company that has an account on there, and you can see all the ads that they run, right? And just as an example, before the show, I ran a search for the ads that NHRA is running. They've got 83 different ads that they've ran recently, right, on Facebook. I count 2 that show a human face. 2. One shows Tony Stewart, one shows John Force, right? And to me, that is kind of a really great like glimpse into the issue, is that I think that we spend so much time trying to teach people how to, degree a camshaft or whatever, or talk about some technical jargon that flies over the head of most fans, even the most tuned in fans, that we aren't spending enough time storytelling. We're not spending enough time creating narrative in something that people can get really invested in and engaged with. And the example I was going to use was my little girl, my daughter, 9 years old. She has been kind of anti-loud noise since she was born. She was born premature, hypersensitive to loud noises, never liked going to the drag strip much other than being with her dad, right? She wants to come hang out, but she can hardly stand all the loud noise. And I've always kind of like tried to, flirt with the idea of getting her in a junior dragster and, too loud, too loud, too loud. Well, guess what? She makes friends with little Victoria Beaner, 12-year-old junior dragster racing superstar. And guess what she's asking me for every day now? A junior dragster, because her friend Victoria races. She doesn't care about going 80 miles an hour. She doesn't care about the mechanics of it, but her friend, this person that she has made a connection with, has influenced her, right? And now she wants to give it a try. And I would like to believe that that will translate into having an appreciation for the craft and learning more about it and how it works and why we're doing things. Like, we can't just do it the same way, right? Like, we can't do it the way we've always done it. Hope that, you're going to have an engine that needs rebuilt in the driveway and you're going to be able to bring your kid out there. I mean, that ship has sailed. We have to find other ways. And one of the surefire mechanisms is telling stories and connecting people with other people. I think all the time about stick and ball sports and how significant they are. And everybody using, stick and ball sports are put on a pedestal in America, right? Like baseball players, basketball players, football players, these people are heroes, legends, icons. But what did I just mention? I didn't mention bats and balls. I didn't talk about the mechanics of the perfect three-point shot. I didn't talk about a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. I talked about heroes and icons and legends, these characters that have helped take those sports to the heights they're at today, the reverence that those people created, the connections we formed with them, watching them play the game. And I think, again, it all goes back to those fateful words of Wally Parks, the NHRA, where the cars are the stars. That is so incorrect, unfortunately. And I mean, no disrespect, obviously.
Yeah, that's so wrong.
I mean, I see the cars, the racing, like the sport, much the same way baseball, basketball, football, soccer, hockey, whatever. That's like the language, right? It's like the language we're speaking, but the people speaking it are what's really important. It's the common interest. It's the common thread. And I've said this before, loud cars.
The car's the tool that guy's using, like
100%. And I think so long as our promotional efforts and our growth efforts are rooted in trying to get people invested in this thrill show, like most fans, and we have to treat it, everybody's different, but there's like two distinct groups. Like, we have to cater to our racer base and we have to foster growth amongst our racers. There's no doubt about it, right? Like, we have to do everything we can to keep those third, second, fourth, whatever, those generational race teams racing. But the reality is that, like, these millions of people watching Formula One, most of them will never race Formula One, like all of them, right? So if you make it all about the thrill of driving one of these cars in 4.7 Gs and 300 miles per hour and all these different things, like, I can't relate to that. I'm never going 340, right? Well, I might. But I'm just saying, in general terms, most people cannot relate to driving a 12,000 horsepower race car. Most people will never go. I mean, I know people that haven't been 100 miles an hour, right? They get to when they ride with me. So it's always fun if they haven't, but it's like, I've met people that have an interest in this stuff that have no real desire to jump behind the wheel of one of them. And I think we kind of have like a one size fits all sales pitch for our sport. Like, hey, if we get you out to the racetrack and throw some nitro in your face, you'll just be hooked. Like, it's got to be deeper than that. The connection has to be more significant than that. People, by and large, follow other people.
We're also relying on the participation in the sport. That's always been drag racing's thing. It relies on, hey, we'll get you out there, get started at an early age and participate. Everyone nearly at a drag race is a participant or has participated or wants to participate. That's not the case at an NBA game, or that's not the case at an F1 event. I'm never achieving this. I'm not going to get in an F1 car. That ship has sailed. I'm a whatever your career is, but you're still interested in it. You've been sold on it via a different method. And in drag racing, we forego all that. And it's just, your connection needs to be the fact that you've done this, or you want to do it, or you
and we seem collectively to kind of pay
level.
no mind to people that haven't raced. right?
That's right.
Like
Everybody's got to
yeah,
have
it's
some
true.
skin in
Yeah.
the game.
Yeah.
But these numbers on this PRI report bear this out. These numbers, while I'm very encouraged by them and excited by them, they really are somewhat inflated because of that thing that I'm saying. Because there are so many hot rods out there, so many drag cars, so many cars that, you know, it might just be a really fast street car, but you take it to the drag strip and change the tires on it or something. Now it's a race car. And so now it fits into these stats. And there's so many of those where there's only 20 F1 cars in the world, right? So it just changes those numbers a lot. And however, if I'm a race team, or if I'm a parts manufacturer or reseller, that's great, and I'm excited about that because I can sell parts to all those people. But if I'm a racer, if I'm a sponsor, if I'm in the media, we still have our work to do because those numbers don't really apply to us in the same way. We have to do the work to try to generate that interest, and that to me is where that the youth movement numbers and everything that's the media coverage, that's more of the numbers that we need to look at.
Matter. The cars don't matter. It is the tool, you know, and I recognize my dad. I remember growing up, we would always, you know, my dad, we kept shit nice, right? Like no fingerprints, no, you know, polished wheels, no brake dust, like no rubber on the wheelie bars, no rubber on the, I mean, we would scrape the wheel tubs after a run. You know what I'm saying? Like he wanted his shit nice all the time. And he would actually have he would be like frustrated with racers that treated their cars as tools. He would always reference Warren Johnson.
We were in the middle.
Like we go to an NHRA race,
but at a certain point, my dad would. But it was like sometimes I would say something like, "We need to clean the car. Let's do this." He'd say, "It's a race car, not a show car."
Well, and so to that point, I think that there's that appreciation, you know, and there are always going to be the racers that, you know, especially guys that, you know, people like our folks or whatever that like kind of came up on their own, working on this stuff after hours and on the weekends, chasing the dream, you know, they want nice stuff. But when you get to some of these professional levels, I think that Warren Johnson example is great. Warren, that car to him, that Olds Cutlass, that 99 Camaro, whatever he was driving, those were just a tool. It was just the tool he was using for the job in front of him. And I think that he is a great example. I mean, the professor, I mean, this guy had a real personality. He was a character that people loved or hated. There was very little middle ground when it comes to Warren Johnson. But I mean, this is a guy that faded into kind of oblivion in the sport of drag racing and pro stock. And I'm sure there's a lot of contributing factors, but he couldn't garner the sponsorship support he needed to race. Right. And I think it just goes back to the fact that we're focused on the tools. The whole sport's focused on the tools, but we need to be focused on the people, the men and women using those tools. And I think that and it's interesting because to your point about NBA basketball, to me, the coolest part about drag racing is its accessibility. Like I've had multiple people from other walks of the motorsports life tell me that drag racing is pretty much the first bridge you cross getting into motorsports. Like even if you aspire
those numbers
to be
bear that out also.
Yeah. I mean, it is the first barrier you cross in motorsports. No matter where you're going to end up, you probably went to a test and tune, or you probably ended up at a drag strip or a grudge night or whatever the case may be as you embarked on your motorsports career. That said, like if we could marry these two things, if we could recognize that we have to promote stars, we have to identify lovable, likable, polarizing personalities and pour fuel on those flames, it would be amazing. Because if we could bring new people to the sport and have them over the course of time realize that unlike the NBA, unlike the NFL, they can probably do this. They could probably work hard enough.
But that's what also hurts it. Is that we've got people out here that, you know, the guy that makes it to the NBA, the NFL or whatever, they're the baddest son of a bitch around. You know, like they could go around the state, make every kid in school feel like that they suck at basketball, even if they're great, you know. But in drag racing, that's where we struggle, is because you can go out here and buy this badass car and go out there and make a few licks and start to pick it up pretty quick. You know, and I think but that's what I
agree, but I do think there's a difference between Lyle Barnett or Jason Scruggs.
There is, but they get to line up. They get to line up next to each other a lot of times.
But I think that can be a good thing. I mean, I don't think that's all bad.
I don't know, because you know,
it is harder to separate if you're elite,
the professional.
If you are like the absolute best, because there are so many. What's the word I'm looking for? Things that will level it out. Like you're saying, drag racing is the entryway. It's the first barrier, but then it doesn't go farther beyond that. It kind of just stays right there in the middle, instead of, now like go-kart racing. It starts out, kids are racing go-karts and they're racing whatever the next levels are. I'm not even familiar with it, and I don't want to say it because
right. They work their way up.
There was outlaws,
right.
sprint cars, whatever. Yep. Then you end up in NASCAR, you end up in IndyCar or whatever, and you get to those highest levels, and then you really are the baddest son of a bitch, and you are one of the elite 20, 30, 40 drivers or whatever. But in drag racing, there's 100,000 of us, and it's just harder to stand out. You get in quicker, but then it's harder to go anywhere.
Right. There's no doubt. I mean, and that is another that I think is solved by a completely and this would be actually a good time to pivot some of the conversation, because what it really, I mean, and I'm reminded of it by the cover of Drag Illustrated this month, is what it really comes down to is putting money in these guys' hands. We have to find a way as a sport to create an environment at the highest level where it makes sense to put the most qualified driver in the car. Right. I mean, because I think right now, I mean, a lot of these races, if you're Joe team owner that's got a fairly solid small business and you can afford to race and you earmark X amount of budget every year, you can write off a lot of it on your taxes. Like, it makes sense across the board. And you can go field a car. Right. And maybe you can't race all the time. If you're going and racing for $2,500 or $5,000 and you're going to lose your ass because you're going to spend more than that on diesel, it doesn't really matter that much if you win in the lose in the first round or win the race. Right. So why not drive it yourself? Why not get those kicks yourself? Why not struggle yourself? Why not figure it out yourself? I can't count how many times I've talked to guys that tell me like, hey, man, if we're going to suck, we might as well suck with me. And at least I'll get to have fun and I'll get to drive the car. But if there was that carrot of $100,000, $1 million,
right.
Massive,
you might go try to find that bad son of a bitch. Right?
You're going to go, you know what? Yeah. I like driving the car, but I'd have a lot better shot at winning if I put XYZ driver in it. And that's what I'm saying is it's the most exciting part of this conversation is that none of these things are really impossible. Nothing we're talking about is beyond the realm of reason. I honestly think that there could be significant changes to the NHRA purse structure as an example right now, and it wouldn't sink the ship. You know what I mean? Like, I think that those opportunities exist. And I mean, I think World Series of Pro Mod, the Pro Superstar Shootout, those are examples that it can be done. And it changes the dynamic greatly when you have real meaningful consequences, right? Like, someone's going to win or lose $100,000 in a single afternoon, right? I mean, it's a big deal to these guys and gals. And I think that type of stuff, like, if we can marry up some of these conversations and just start having them more frequently. Like, I dived in here today and I'm going, okay, are people going to no, we have to keep talking about this. Like, we have to recognize that the pieces are out there. I mean, we recognize that we need to lean into technology, and we see our sport doing that in many ways. I mean, I'm really proud of what we've done here at Drag Illustrated. We've got multiple podcasts. We're about to launch 2 more shows. Super exciting stuff. We got a brand new gambling show coming together with you, Elon and Rex. We got a brand new reaction show coming together with Kayla Zadell. We've got PDRA Live. We've got the racing business with Jason Dukes. I mean, we've got this show. We've got all this stuff that we're trying to create to tell more stories and put more faces in front of people and introduce folks to characters. So I think some of the technology is happening. We see Cletus McFarland exploding on YouTube, 1320 video as big as ever, new content creators coming out of the woodwork, events popping up. Like, so the technology thing's happening, right? We may have been a little late to the party, but I do think it's happening slowly but surely. And I know even in the case of this show, I tell you guys all the time, this is still an educational process in a lot of ways, because unlike stick and ball sports fans, this community has never really had content like this. The content that has existed in drag racing since day one has been hellfire and brimstone, cars backflipping or bursting into flames.
10 years ago, you couldn't find shit for content on drag racing. Like, that's no lie. In like 2013, 14, I scoured the internet, and I mean, there was nothing. I mean, you typed in drag race for a podcast, it brought up RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yeah,
I mean, like, there was nothing. There was nothing. It just floors me.
Oh, it's been a firestorm since then. I mean, even back in the ADRL days, I tried to find footage of that when we raced that, and that was in the 2007, 8, 9, 10. It's hard to find stuff from even then, but there's been an explosion just on YouTube and coverage of events, live streams, all the, the NC Pro modders of the world, all the different ways we receive it. So we are very fortunate in that regard, but there's still a lot of work to do. Actually, before we jump off of this, talking about the youth movement and how that goes as it relates to drag racing, Scott Wildgust sent me a text while we were on here, just kind of telling me some of his experience through his daughter, Sienna, who we've had on the show. 17 years old, first year in pro stock, learning on the job, right? And trying to figure this deal out, and trying to fight the battle, find support, find sponsorship. He says 6 races into NHRA, Sienna is the youngest driver to ever qualify in NHRA pro stock. Has yet to have a live interview in the pits, asked to participate in an autograph session, been invited to a pre-race party, or even just asked how things are going by the NHRA. So
wow,
that's his experience. And I know there's only so much that goes around. That's all resource based and priority based or whatever.
Bullshit.
But hey, but listen,
that's a perfect opportunity.
But
when you're talking about priorities, that ought to move up your priority. Yeah.
But that is the priority list. But that is, we talk about this a lot. How, Erica Enders for a while, it's a part of her story that gets lost, where she kind of burst on the scene with Cagnazzi, had good backing, and then it was like a decade of jumping ride to ride, mediocre equipment, piecing together sponsors. That's kind of a forgotten part of her story until she hit this deal with Elite, 10 years ago now, and has carried to GOAT status at this point. But if you take a Sienna Wildgust, who is kind of right there on that verge right now of, do I continue to press on? Do I continue to make this effort and try to make something out of this? Or is this not even going to be worth my time? Where's that tipping point happen? And how can we, or NHRA, or the sport as a whole, support that type of person, where it's just, you don't have to have that once in a lifetime rags to riches story or whatever, like an Erica Enders, where you can get this support, where you don't have to go through this struggle. Because she's done nothing wrong. Hasn't made any mistakes. She hasn't had any reason not to continue on, but yet, even as someone that has kind of ticked all these boxes, she's not getting the support. So it's how does that begin to change?
First and foremost, it is an absolute crying shame that Sienna Wildgust hasn't heard anything from anybody about, from the higher ups at NHRA, about what she's done in these 6 races. I cannot tell you, I lay awake at night, thanking my lucky stars for the willingness of so many of these men and women to come support us at Bradenton every March. It's not lost on me. They're away from their family. They're away from their business. They're spending insane amount of money to go do this. And I can't thank them enough. I constantly think about how blessed I am to have ever spent a moment of my life staring at a whiteboard, trying to figure out which pro mod team I wanted to come to my race. Right. And who I was going to leave out, and dealing with that. I feel so blessed. And to see the NHRA have someone like the Wildgusts come in who are willing. Can you imagine having someone be willing to make that kind of an investment? I don't want to air out other people's business, but this shit's not cheap. Right. So if you've got a team, if you've got a group of people, human beings, at the bare minimum, they deserve to be treated with respect. Right. And some level of appreciation or some level of gratitude. So they're going to spend umpteen hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to this point. They're not going to get a high five, a thanks, good to see you here, nothing. And beyond that, there's not going to be any bridge effort. There's not going to be any effort to say, hey, we've got this team that's got enough resources to run a limited series. How can we keep them out here at all of them? What do we have to do? Which one of our sponsors would it make a good fit for? We have those conversations all the time. I literally had that conversation with Brian Bolander at Peak Antifreeze just a couple of weeks ago in Chicago. It's how can I get Peak involved with World Series, but also perhaps more importantly, get Peak involved with a team inside of World Series? Because I know that that's what would really be a huge difference maker, is for us to start connecting sponsors with race teams. And those are conversations that I have a lot.
Perfect example is this weekend. Beatty working on Spencer Hyde's car.
Yeah, Mark
outfitter,
Beatty, Spencer
from
Hyde is
Redline.
someone we connected with Mark Beatty.
Yep.
And in Mark Beatty at Redline Synthetic Oils, but trust me and I trust him. And we have a nearly 2-decade-long relationship. And it's like he supports this guy. And that's what I want to be kind of like getting in our orbit. Like, and I'm very proud of that. Like the connections that we make and the way we're able to tie people together. I mean, the Wild Gusts are another example. I got them connected with Mark Beatty at Redline. I get these guys connected with Tommy and Anita at Stroud. Like, hey, what can we do to get you more involved? Or get you to help these teams or do more for this or vice versa. Find a way to serve one another. And I think
that's a perfect way of putting on events and why people enjoy them. That's how I have parties. People love the parties that come to my parties, but a lot of that reason is because, I try to make everyone feel involved. I try to make sure that nobody feels left out. I try to make sure that they're entertained, whether if I got to stay up to the last dog that's there, like that's fine. But I want to make sure everybody's entertained, everybody's involved. And it doesn't require a whole lot on your part to do that.
And it doesn't I'm going to tell you something else. It doesn't require a $500,000 a year salary. It doesn't require a college degree. It doesn't require any sort of advanced training. It really kind of boils down to having parents that taught you how to fucking treat people. You know what I mean? And like that, it's not really that complicated. Like if you have people in your house, you should treat them like you're glad to have them, or don't have them. If you don't want people at your house, don't have them. Right? Don't be hosting parties. Right?
Yeah, JT, that's why you've never been to my house.
I know, right?
True story. Side note. But I mean, I do think that is pretty hard to wrap my head around, and I think that's shocking. And it's for me, it's this is what I was going back to what I was talking about. We are so blessed as a sport to have so many people that are willing to spend themselves silly, go to the ends of the earth to go drag racing. You guys have heard me make this example before, but one of the proudest moments I think I've ever had as a drag racer, and this is weird, and I think it may surprise you if you haven't heard me tell this story before, but I remember in 2020, amidst the pandemic, and it's horrible, right? Everything is bad news, doom and gloom everywhere you look. The future of drag racing is up in the air. Nobody knows when events are going to happen, when tracks are going to be able to do this stuff again, whenever we're able to open the gates, whenever we're going to be able to have fans back out. Real challenging time. And I remember Mike and I went to the NHRA national event when they were holding all the events in Indianapolis. We went to the U.S. Nationals, and there's been all this hubbub that the NHRA was going to make you get your temperature taken and wear a mask.
That was like the best event ever. I'm so glad we went.
And we go to that race, and I think to myself, all right, you've got cars with, guys out here have Trump tattoos. Like, we are some redneck, hardworking,
Eric
blue
Trump
collar
himself.
Right. We got Eric Trump on the property. And I'm thinking to myself, there's no way these racers are going to follow these rules. There's no way. And I roll through the gates, and myself, just like everybody else, leaned forward, got my temperature taken, put my Shaw on or whatever the hell, and rolled on in. And I look around, and everybody's following the rules.
The mesh bandana. That was the preferred way to go to COVID at the drag strip, was the mesh bandana. But I admit that's what I wore also.
The moral of this story is that drag racers, that some of the most set in their ways group of people I've ever been around, right? I mean, this is a pretty matter-of-fact, straight-shooting group of people. And it was no secret that this community was largely opposed to a lot of the mask mandates and a lot of these COVID rules and restrictions that were being put into place. But when it came time to go drag racing, they were immediately prepared to fall in line and do what they had to do to go drag racing. And I think it was like a microcosm or like an example of just how committed this group of people is. Like, God bless NHRA, and I'm not here to bag on them. I know they're everybody's favorite punching bag, and we all get some shots in here and there. There's no doubt that they're the world leader in our space. They're the major leagues of drag racing. However, I would argue that I think that their success is not rooted in some sort of great business model. It's not rooted in some sort of masterful execution. Or some spectacularly great idea. It's rooted in a uniquely passionate group of people that will move heaven and hell to go drag racing, that will all but sell their soul, make their kids go without to go drag racing. And I mean, some of that's good and some of it's bad, but it paints a picture of like the opportunity that exists in this industry. Like, this is a group of people that will do anything to see the sport continue, and to think that we've had this kind of community and have so far yet to go. I mean, it's simultaneously like exciting and frustrating for me, because it's exciting when I put my businessman hat on and go, man, there's so much opportunity. There's so much left for us to do. But whenever I put my fan hat on, I'm a little frustrated, because it's like, what have we been doing? Right? I mean, we've got these people. How many sponsors, how many big money guys, how many teams do I need to list? We have to break the cycle. Big money team comes in, big money team comes out. Foreign superpower government sponsored race car comes in, goes out. We've got to get some of these people here and keep them here for 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, that happens. I mean, it happens in other sports. You buy a sports team and you own it for generations. You involve yourself with some of these teams and you're a part of the team forever. Like, we've got to quit letting people exit our sport. And I think sometimes we don't do, I mean, when we well know the reward ain't there, right? The monetary reward is not there. If we know that going in, shouldn't we know that we've got to like double down on treating them right and making them feel good,
taking care of them,
taking good
and
care of them?
letting them. You've mentioned it before, letting them have their tents up and letting them bring people to the track and
Hey,
show
listen,
them the experience. Man, you know, I mean,
we're going to charge you to get in here, and I know hotels are double what they were a couple years ago, and I know gas prices are high, but check this out: we're going to make you pay to come. We're not going to pay you shit. You know, no big deal, right? We're not going to pay you nothing, and we don't care if you come or not. How about that? We see you, don't see you, don't care. I mean, like, in what world does that make sense? I mean, that's the pitch. Like, that's the elevator pitch. It's like, hey, man, we got a lot of people watching our TV show. We got some new sponsors. Don't know how it really impacts you, but shit's looking good for us. You know, heard diesel's pretty high. Yeah, that's rough, huh?
Oh, and did you get a new sponsor? You care if I get that contact?
Yeah. Hey, man, I heard you got a new sponsor. Are they here? You know, it's, I mean, and I'm like I said, some of this shit has to get talked about in a public forum. And I think that these things have to be discussed, because all the pieces are there. There's just so much we need. And this is what we've tried to be here at Drag Illustrated. And I hope people recognize this, and we can't cover it all, and we can't do everything. I wish we could go to every race. I wish I could go to every race. I really, truly do wish that we could do more. And we're constantly trying to do more, but we want to galvanize this sport of drag racing, because what I want everybody here to know is that you're part of a big, powerful community. You're part of a community that, I mean, there are people in our community that rule countries. There are people in our community that run billion-dollar businesses. There are people in our country that have invented world-changing technology. It's unbelievable how many impactful, powerful, really significant operators there are in this space. And if we could just get even remotely close to some unified front, there's no telling what we could do. But the problem, to JT's earlier point, is that so much of the talent, so much of the excitement is like spread amongst this massive community that it really is hard. But it also, in my opinion, do a little self-promotion here for World Series of Pro Mod, highlights the importance of standalone events and singular happenings that kind of lump everybody together, that kind of fly higher or fly above the regular occurrences of our sport, right? Like, we need more of these. Chili Bowl, we use that example internally a lot, because I think it's a pretty masterful example.
Measuring stick. It's a measuring stick. Like, you're measuring the PDRA guys against the NHRA guys against the, like, it measures everybody, puts them together in one arena.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the magic of it. And they do some things like, I mean, the part of the drama that they have had is not paying enough. Like, I think that the Chili Bowl still, after all these years, pays 10 grand to win. It's more about winning the trophy, but they're likely having to recognize, in the face of Kyle Larson's new high limits sprint car deal, that they're probably going to have to revisit that, or they're going to have to, find a way to marry those approaches where you need this pomp and circumstance, you need the significance, but you also need to make sure that the numbers are headed in the right direction. And again, I don't know that anybody's ever going to be tasked with making someone a millionaire by winning a drag race, right? I mean, they're so invested, they've spent so much money to get to this point that it's very difficult to ever make that whole. Right. But if you can help them minimize the bleeding and show them the promise of a bright, shiny new future, or something to be excited about moving towards. But I mean, you look at NHRA and a lot of these purses are no different than they were 20, 30 years ago. Most of this stuff has been stagnant for years. Nothing else has stayed the same. All the expenses have risen. The competition level has risen. Everything else is on the rise, but we haven't found a way to get purse money, to do the same thing. So, and
What do you
that's
think
not
about
across the board.
Yeah. What do you think about on the good news front, possibly for drag racing, the Stewart-Haas deal, where they're going to shut down at the end of the season, selling their charters. And it hasn't been talked about in the mainstream media because I don't know how tuned in they are to this aspect of it. But Tony's ever increasing involvement in drag racing has to be a big catalyst behind that move. And
I think it has to be, right?
Yeah, it has to be.
I
And
bet.
what do you think about?
I don't know.
That's one.
I read it as less opportunity existing in that business.
Well, I feel like it's a smart. I feel Tony's not going to continue to do something that he's not having fun at, or he's not making money at, or is not doing what he wanted it to do. But however, it is coinciding with his increasing involvement in drag racing. And Tony he's
busy in drag racing. I mean, like you can't do both, right? I mean, it would be hard.
But as far as all those things you just said about changing the narrative, putting eyeballs on it, standalone events, the purse, all the things, he's someone I feel like that has in his short time done some of those things and helped to change some of that narrative. Maybe we continue to see more of that now that he's sort of tapering off his involvement in at least NASCAR for now, or at least the big leagues of NASCAR.
The Stewart-Haas deal, I had a lot of thoughts about it. I don't know enough about like the inner workings of cup racing to
is Junior going to buy that, Mike?
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know. I have no intel. But
I don't either. I've just been seeing that everywhere. So
I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know all the inner workings of it.
No, I just know you're more plugged in out there.
I just know that those charters are valuable because there's only so many of them,
for sure.
And people that are looking to make that investment and get involved in the sport, that's like the only way in. And so they become available.
You coached his nephew, right?
No, not Tony's.
No, not Tony's.
Oh, Dale.
Junior. So I thought you might have some insight.
No, I don't have that.
I guess for me, my immediate
but Junior
reaction
Motorsports is a very significant team in every realm of NASCAR outside of Cup. So it would make sense to make that move.
Yeah, it would make sense.
I read it just like with sadness. I was really surprised by the widespread sadness there was. I watched a video with Kenny Wallace on YouTube last night, and it was like his immediate reaction to this. And he also didn't know, a lot of the details, but he read the press release, the quote that they put out to the media. And he was genuinely sad for all the people that are going to have to be trying to find new jobs.
That does suck. I know a handful of people that work there personally. And everyone's going to have to find their way, and those are not easy jobs to come by if you want to work in that industry.
Well, my point is, are we not staring down the barrel of a similar reality with the sport of drag racing at the highest levels at some point when some of these iconic teams, these flagship operations, and you guys know who I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
But with drag racing, they just go away. They just stop showing up. But there's no maybe there's trucks and trailers and parts and stuff like that the team sells individually, but there's no equity that they're giving up, or no special reserve space in the sport. Now, when you're talking about John Force and Kalita and these other ones, in our minds there is, but there's no so-and-so XYZ team can show up with all the latest and greatest stuff and park in that same spot the next weekend, and we just go on. There's no formality. There's no, this is all that we're accepting as far as the number of pro teams, and then we're closing the gates. That's what they're doing at F1. That's what they're doing at NASCAR. I don't know how IndyCar works. I imagine it's similar, but that's what creates that value, in my opinion, is a bit. What creates a big part of it, and it helps you really control who is involved in your sport and who's going to continue to bring the money, bring the investment, bring the personalities. And again, but for all the reasons we've talked about, we don't have that in drag racing.
We've had a lot of conversations, internally about the charter system and how something like that could work. And if there was, how that would impact an NHRA or something along those lines. I think the interest is so spread out that as far as Top Fuel, Funny Car, Pro Stock, like it's something you can do when you've got a singular class, right? You've got X amount of cup charters, right?
Are there charters for Xfinity and truck? Someone answer that in the comments, because I really don't know without Googling.
I don't know either, but I'm assuming there is. I mean, I can be right or wrong, right?
I guess we're going to, yeah, just go ahead and Google it.
Yeah, I'm Googling it. So,
and I don't even know about IndyCar either, but to me, it's a super interesting thing. The timing of it. And just the fact that they have not had recent success. I think that they lost some sponsors, and then
it doesn't look like there's any equivalent charter system for like Camping World Truck or the Xfinity Series. It's more of a traditional. But
talking about the Stewart Haas deal, it's I think it's something that they wrote out and sort of, kept going as long as it made sense, and it's just stopped making sense. But then you have other. Well,
don't you think you have to talk about that? Like, why did it stop making sense? Like, because from what I gather, they were not able to sell the level of sponsorship and generate the level of revenue that they historically had been able to.
I don't know. We should have Tony on here.
Yeah, but if one of your flagship guys, Tony, is over here messing around in drag racing, a lot of the times, I mean, that's going to make a big decision there too. Because I mean, it's going to be hard to jump on over here.
He wasn't driving the car.
No, I know, but
they did lose their flagship driver, Kevin Harvick, this year, and so that I think was a big blow. And then they've just struggled to replace that star power between Tony, Kevin, and then the sponsors that come along with that.
And even having Tony involved with those sponsors all the time, and being like that, like let's say that's his number one priority, and I don't know for sure, but if that's his number one priority, I'm sure he puts everything into it. He's working with the sponsors a lot more. Now, if he's going away every weekend to these other races, it's got to put a strain on everything.
And Tony's he wants to have fun and he wants to win.
Absolutely.
And if he's not doing either of those, then he's going to be out. But then you have other people making investments like Michael Jordan. I mean, maybe we're talking about something on a whole different level
or whatever.
But the shop that he's built over here in Huntersville, North Carolina, just south of Mooresville, is like next level, absolutely next level. And if you talk to a lot of these teams, a lot of these rigs that they have on the road out there they're older, get shuffled around between these teams, get rewrapped or rebuilt or revamped. But Jordan, he's out there buying all the latest brand new trucks and trailers, a fleet of them, all the latest great stuff. And I know that's a whole different deal. We're talking about Michael Jordan here, who's had just a little bit of financial success,
a little bit.
But you do have people like him looking at this in an investment, and those charters are going to get snapped up right away. So you just have people that are eager to take that opportunity and run with it, think they can do something with it. And then you kind of have another one that has run its course. So, for one reason or another, but it certainly is interesting that announcement alone of that NASCAR team, how big that is, that's happening. But if that happened in drag racing, it's not even, it would get swept under the rug by even drag racing media. We would not talk about it. We would just try to, that sucks to hear. And then we kind of just move on to the next thing.
There's no arguing there. I mean, it seems like something that happens all too frequently, where it's weird because I think we probably have the most reason to be biased, but are perhaps the least biased.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I don't know. It was the biggest news in the history of drag racing, when he came into a car. So
I do, though. It does to me. It just brings to light the reality of, the kind of, there are some iconic flagship teams that exist in our sport that I'm, genuinely concerned about, who replaces those teams and, what exists, what opportunity exists for that next crop of I mean, we got to be thinking about who is going to be, Antron Brown and Ron Capps as examples of people that went out on their own after Don Schumacher Racing left the sport, and have continued to have success. I mean, Antron just won this past weekend in Chicago. Ron Capps won a championship. I mean, they've had success, but those guys, they're veterans. They've been around here for a long time. And we've got, is there a pathway for like the next, guy up, the next gal up. And we see some of the struggles. We saw Ida Zetterstrom, make the big announcement. She's moving over here, and it's taken a long time to put the pieces together. And they're still having to do that on a relatively limited budget. They've got, struggling to find the sponsors necessary to field that car at the level they want to, and therefore are going to run an abbreviated season. But
that's another, Ida's another example of I feel like she's made a lot of her mark and made herself into a bigger deal through her own efforts and on social media and stuff. And I don't know that she's really gotten any kind of special treatment or handout from NHRA on that regard either. She's just done a good job building to this.
I mean, they've done a relatively bad job with with Ron Capps and Antron Brown. Mm-hmm. I mean, these guys are stars.
But they're just, honestly, it's all in the presentation. I go back to this all the time. Drag racing needs no fixing. Our sport, we need no changes. We don't need to put spike pits halfway down the track. We don't need to put a motocross jump at the finish line. We don't need to race cars at each other. We don't need to change the way we prep tracks. We don't need to do any of that. We don't need to do demo derby on the racetrack. Our sport, I mean, it is the great American motorsport. It's pure as the driven snow, easy to understand, happens fast. We don't need to change it. It's, to your point, JT, it's like we've got to start focusing on these stories and start focusing on these characters and pouring more into that. The problem the NHRA runs into is, and it goes back to that Sienna Wildgus conversation, is they have not created the relationships necessary with their racer base to make that type of stuff easy or even possible. You know what I mean? Like, you need willing participants. I mean, that's something that one of the first things that I say to someone when I extend an invite to the World Series of Pro Mod is I need you to be a willing participant. I need you to participate in interviews. I need you to take calls from reporters. I need you to provide zippy one-line quotes. I need you to show up at media day. I need you to sign autographs
for Rivals Night.
I mean, we make it very clear that there's an expectation attached to this invitation. And if you want to be one of these guys that
you have to play
flies
a role.
flies under the radar and doesn't talk to anybody, this is probably not the place for you. Nope, not a bad thing. We can all still be friends, but
that's fine. He can come there to the line and mean mug somebody. If that's what you want if
that's what you want your character to be.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the things that the NHRA has kind of run into is they've arrived at this point where I think the next steps are quite clear. Like, we have to get some sort of reality content. We have to get some more storytelling content. And they're making strides. I like these behind the scenes videos they're doing where they show some of the conversation that's happening in the winner's circle or in the shutdown. We're making progress, but we still have to, and they're probably going to have to go outside their current toolbox. I mean, I know what this is like to arrive at that moment where you go, man, I don't know how to do this, but I know someone out there does, and I'm going to have to start ringing phones and asking for help or hiring some help, right? Because there's someone out there that they're going to have to bring in some outside production expertise or some outside expertise to say, hey,
get it out to people. Like NHRA TV should be free. Like,
especially that
it should be completely free to get it in front of fans, like completely free. Somebody wants to tune in that might not necessarily watch every weekend. They don't need a membership to watch that on NHRA TV. Like, they're paying so little to the racers. Like, they've got the money. I mean, at least use it as a tool to get your sponsors' name out there in front of people and your racer sponsors out there in front of people. It's ridiculous that it costs money. It's a professional fucking sport.
No, I mean, you should be, I think it depends. I think if there was like a clear path to generate a tremendous amount of revenue from it, maybe it makes sense to monetize it. I mean, like Formula One, they charge $89.99 for their deal for a year. But I mean, the fact that it's cheaper than NHRA, I mean, sometimes you're paying for the niche, right? You're paying a premium because it's a smaller audience. I understand that. I think that makes some sense. But I agree, when the numbers are so small and you're trying to grow, I think you have to calculate what the value
you can throw in a pay-per-view every now and then for a big race, like Indy, make it pay-per-view or whatever. But for the most part, you should be able to sit down and watch that NHRA TV when it's live.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue, man. And I think definitely at this point in time in 2024, where we're looking for more eyeballs and we're trying to grow, I honestly think you've got to use every tool that's available to you to put the sport in front of new folks. And you don't want to put a paywall in front of it. You have to kind of know But it's also I see the NHRA and they just don't miss a trick. Like I was just on NHRA.com a minute ago, and I'm like blown away by how many Google AdSense ads
Oh, it's
are on that
crazy, isn't
website.
it? It is nuts.
You know, and I'm
Yeah.
going, okay, this is like the tip of the sword for our sport, and almost every ad on here is for some random shit that has nothing to do with racing. You know, like
You
high
guys need that.
heels.
You guys got to step up your ad blocker game on your browser.
I
So
suppose.
I'm on NHR.com and see no ads. So I probably shouldn't even admit that.
It is. It's just wild. I just think that if somebody wants to see racing, they ought to be able to tune in to see professional racing. You know, I really do. And we should be able to see it live. You know, it's good point or a good time to probably talk about like No Prep Kings. You know, it packed the house at Flying H this weekend. Their YouTube channel seems to be doing really good.
Yeah,
pulling numbers on that.
That actually is, that's a good example of what you're talking about there.
Yeah,
because we've seen feedback already that especially the hardcore people, I think the audience that they've already built through TV, the people that are going to follow that deal through the gates of hell are loving the instant access to the NPK deal, because that was the one thing you heard about. I think you had the people that didn't care to follow it live and just were waiting for that TV show. And then you had a whole different subset of people that maybe even didn't watch the TV show, but wanted to watch it live and follow all the results. Probably your more hardcore drag racing fan. And they seem to be loving that the YouTube deal so far. And I think they've done a good job. They for kind of just jumping out there and doing this deal on YouTube. I think it is well done
for something new. I mean, like 132,000 views on just for day 2.
Yep. And they packed the place at Flying H, and it looked great. The racing looked good. Weather was good.
Yeah.
So yeah, that deal, I think that was probably up to this point that was the biggest Streetcar Takeover was at Flying H a couple of weeks ago, and that looked like a big success. So looks like they're off to a good start at that track, and it's really good to see.
And there was a little bit of drama over the Instagram live. I just don't know why they just don't go to a pro tree in that thing. I mean,
is that what all the who was fighting? Who tackled somebody?
Well, now that
NFL
was
style in the ditch beside the track. I didn't even see.
That was Jerry Bird, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's
just a fault. If it's a fight on
NPK, and Odom got into it about the Instagram. Like he guaranteed him he'd race him heads up, and I think even $1,500 to race him heads up or something like that. I'm not sure.
It's on
all
NPK,
the details.
The betting, who's going to get in a fight this weekend? The betting odds would be like -800. It's Jerry Bird. -400. It's Swanstrom, and everybody else would probably be plus odds.
Yeah, that's true, right?
I just set the odds for NPK fight betting.
Well, I think I agree. And I'm glad you brought up the pro tree thing, because that is something that I think has to go the way of the dodo. Like, I think it served its purpose, but at some point, we're not street racing. You know what I mean? Like, you're not street racing. You may have started street racing, but what we're doing now is not street racing. And I think as the level of competition has risen, as the eyeballs have risen, the pressures that exist with it have risen, the amount of money everybody's spending has risen. Because if you go to one of these races, you look around, it's not a bunch of do-it-yourselfers. I mean, it's Steve Petty and Jason Miller.
What the controversy is
Stroud.
with the instant green deal and what happened at Flying H specifically, and what was going on there.
From what I understand, it was just an ongoing kind of issue with people, and it's an ongoing issue for a while, that people just kind of knowingly go up there and guess the light. And so there's typically some sort of conversation that's going to happen beforehand where like, hey, I'm going to race you heads up, right? Like JC was saying about Justin Swanstrom and John Odom. And then you get up there and somebody jumps, or sometimes the tree's a long time. And that's, and you never know. Like sometimes you're going to sit there for a second, sometimes you're not. But don't you agree that it flies in the face of everything we're trying to do by even having that? Like I don't think our competitors should have to be making some deal before the race to try to make it fair.
Right.
Because I understand that
you're trying to mimic the flashlight, right? I mean, you're trying to mimic the flashlight is what it's about. So, but now that you both know your stage, okay, the ambers are removed, correct? And then you're going to get a green when when it drops, but you're not going to see the ambers or anything. So, I mean,
and you're basically
who
racing
cares?
pro mods on a
Yeah, yeah. I
on
mean,
a
so
track.
so
in
you
a
can wait
actual
until the green
facility.
light comes on, you know, like race heads up, like we're waiting for that green to come on, which would mimic like the flashlight. But people know that there's ambers in there, you know, so when both are staged, you could take a guess and see if you could crack it, you know, before and not go red.
And it would appear to me that this is an ongoing,
It
a
is.
large.
It's been going on
And
the
I
whole
think
time.
from the production side, they're probably going, "Hey, we don't want to get rid of this thing that constantly creates drama." But I think you have to go, because I'm sure that there's some value there. Like they're going, "Hey, we understand that it's not ideal, but it also stirs up a lot of shit, gets people talking, you know." But I don't know that that's what you want people talking about, right? And so I think you have to go, I believe enough in the sport of drag racing, like in its natural form, like that drama is going to come about some way
Right.
or another.
I want to see the
If
best
it's not
driver.
instant green, it's going to be staging duels. If it's not
Right.
staging duels, it's going to be something else. I mean, I think you have to think about those things and accept the challenge. Like, hey, we're probably going to lose this kind of layup. It's like the Real World Road Rules producers sliding a bottle of tequila on the dinner table in the Real World house, right? Or whatever. Like they know that that's going to be the catalyst for some drama. Let's have a party tonight, guys. Let's have a party in the house. You know, let's all do shots. And I think that the instant green is kind of like that. It's that bottle of tequila getting slid into the center of the room that we know is sure to get the party started. But I think that as No Prep Kings and that brand of drag racing continues to evolve, and Mike, you said it. I mean, they're racing pro mods. I mean, these cars are very fast, high-end operations. We've got racers who want to be taken seriously, want to be mentioned in the same breath of these other professional drag racers. I think the marrying of those worlds, I really do not think it's going to negatively impact.
Well,
So is the delay? This commenter here is saying that the delay is the same every run. Is that? I mean, I haven't watched it enough, but it's like it's so after they stage, then you're pretty much, once you see the delay one time, it's going to be constant throughout the eliminations. I mean,
I'm not sure about that, but
I mean, or maybe it could appear that way.
But
I think the problem is
it's
when
somebody
you take
guessing,
yeah.
and me watching, they're going to find, dude. Racers will find something to fight about. Trust me.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be the Instagram. They will find something to fight about. But I want to see the
We
best
haven't heard
driver.
about
I want to
this.
see. I want to see the best driver win. I want to see the. You know, like
I thought they.
I don't want to see
fixed
somebody
this,
guessing,
the
take out
Instagram
somebody.
thing. I thought that this was an issue,
It's been
like
an
a
issue
year
for
ago, where they were just removing the ambers from the tree, and then that was causing some kind of other situation, and then they fixed
Most
it
of the timing systems
where they didn't have to do that and just went
have
instant
instant green setting.
But we haven't heard about this in some time now, and so it seems like
they were still guessing. Drivers were still guessing, you know, for quite a while. So yeah, it wasn't. It hasn't. I guess it hasn't blown up as bad as it did last weekend. But
put it in the comments, guys. We want to know.
Yeah, Big Country. He was meaning business down there. It sounded like.
Yeah, I don't want Big Country yelling at me.
Me neither.
Top end. That's something I'm trying to avoid.
It was cool to see Flying H packed out like that, right? I saw. I think that it's a real incredible thing that they have going there. Like the fact that, you know, even in the face of this, and I'm anxious to see kind of like what the future holds for it, because that's a hell of a crowd they had out there, and it's great that they can provide that type of action and excitement at a venue like that, because you know how important that is to the Flying H folks to just have these back-to-back successful events, and you know, lots of people coming out and supporting the place. Like this is a victory in a lot of ways. I'm happy for those guys, man. Midwest Drag Racing Series is headed there next weekend, or this coming weekend. So Flying H, man, they've got a pretty action-packed. Scott Palmer tested his Top Fuel car there the other day.
All that, yeah.
The first time a Top Fuel car had ever been down the brand new Flying H drag strip. So it's an exciting time, man. It is so cool to see that place packed out. It's great to see drag racing, big things happening for the sport of drag racing near my hometown, man.
Oh, it's Kevin Stevenson with the info.
You can fix it on a CompuLink timing system, but Flying H has a portrait system.
There you go. That's why we've heard about it from this fast race more than we've heard about it in a long time. Well,
again, I think that I really truly believe that it's not going to hurt the racing at all. I think it'll actually make it better. And it creates some for me, I think there's value in some continuity from NPK to other brands of drag racing. Like, I think it's okay for it to look similar in some regards. Like, they're doing burnouts, right? They're racing on a track. Like, you're doing all these other things. I think it's probably time to evolve beyond the instant green start, in my opinion. But,
I agree.
It is what it is. We'll see what happens next. Well, hey guys, great conversation, man. I'm glad we were able to riff on that PRI report. It's cool to have these access to this type of numbers and be able to share it, because there's, again, I hope the message to take away from today's show and this conversation just is there's a lot of opportunity out here right now in the sport of drag racing. There's a lot of exciting things happening. There's a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different people that are making an impact. And again, I think that if we can start to lean into this notion that one drag racer is no different than another drag racer. I mean, I say it a lot, but anybody who's ever rolled through that puddle of water, done a burnout, pulled up and lit those 2 bulbs there at the top of that Christmas tree, you're my kind of guy or gal, right? I don't care if it's in a funny car or in a junior dragster or somewhere in between. I think we as a community have to kind of recognize that we're brothers and sisters in arms, and we need to behave as such, because we can do a whole lot together. What do they say? If you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think we here at Drag Illustrated want to see the sport of drag racing go far. So we need to do it together. Thank you guys for being a part of this. Huge shout out to everybody that tunes in each every week, joining us around Drag Racing's water cooler. We appreciate you. Help us spread the gospel of drag racing. Click like, click subscribe, click share. Tell a friend, send an email, forward one along, whatever it takes. Make sure you bring somebody to the party next week. We'll see you here on the Drag Illustrated YouTube channel and Facebook page next Wednesday, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Talk to y'all soon. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, T. Thanks, Blake. Appreciate y'all.
Y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.